Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Get CME for this episode by clicking on the CME link in the show notes. Today, we welcome back Scott Abramson. He is a neurologist. His most recent Kevin MD article is titled The Secret Life of Physicians: Work, Home, and the Battle for Balance. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's good to be here. And I always read your blogs, and I'll always get something interesting out of them. So keep up the great work.
Perfect. And thank you so much for sharing your stories and contributions. So we'll talk about your article in a little bit, but for those who didn't listen to our first episode together, just briefly share your story and journey.
Okay. Well, I worked in Kaiser Permanente medical system from 1979 to when I retired in 2020. I was a frontline neurologist there. So I've been retired about 3.5 years now. And during that time, in addition to my neurology duties, I was very involved with the Kaiser mission to improve communication with patients and doctors, improving so to speak, bedside manners. And I was also involved in our physician wellness endeavor. So that was a big part of my life at Kaiser in those 40 years.
So you mentioned that you are in a committee to improve bedside manner. Just what do you see as the biggest problem right now when it comes to physicians' bedside manner?
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I believe I may have mentioned this last time too, but I really think it boils down to just one word. And that word is not an important word either, really. The word is the, T-H-E. That's what it boils down to. That's the biggest problem, because the way I was taught and the way I practiced for the first 20 years of my life, my approach was, what's the matter? What's the matter? And then I was, and then I'd try to find it and fix it and explain it. But my approach was, what's the matter? You got a pain here. Let me try to figure it out. I'll tell you what you have to do and so forth. But in the last 20 years of my life, I've learned these communication techniques from our Kaiser mission. And the greatest lesson I learned was to eliminate the word the. And the lesson that I learned was what matters. What matters to patients? That's what the key thing was. And that's what made my practice so much more enriched during those last years. So in other words, it's not about it. I mean, you have to know what's the matter. I mean, that's part of our job, but a lot of times we leave it at that. So, okay, you got a cough, Mary, great. It looks like it's an allergy. Let me give you some allergy medicine. Okay. But if you approach it from what matters, it might be something like, so you got this cough, but before we try treatment, let me ask you something. Is there anything that you fear that this cough might be related to? And maybe in the back of this patient's mind, it may be something like, gee, Uncle Joe had lung cancer and they told him it was allergies. And if you get to, it's not just giving a pill for an allergic cough, but if you get to reassure somebody that their cough is not a cancer, boy, what a blessing that is for you as a clinician. How improved is your life, your clinical life that day? You walk out of the exam room and, man, I just didn't cure a cough. I relieved someone's fear.
All right. Wise words. Thank you so much for sharing. So let's talk about kind of a different take on work-life balance. Your KevinMD article is titled The Secret Life of Physicians: Work, Home, and the Battle for Balance. Now tell us, how did your article come together?
Well, Kevin, I think the way it came together is like, I'm kind of like an opposite guy. Like if someone says something, my first reaction is to say, let me be opposite, So and the last time, so the last article I wrote was about, people have been writing about perfectionism is bad. You got to set boundaries and have some balance and all that, and that's great. But the article I wrote then was about that maybe there's something positive about being perfectionistic.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good thing. So when I always see a lot of articles in your blog about work-life balance. We got to spend more time at home, spend more time with families. We got to do mindfulness and meditation and do some goat yoga and all that stuff. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's all good, but what's the flip side of that? What's the flip side? And in the article, that's what I wrote was the flip side of work-life balance. And I don't know whether, I think I maybe originally titled it something like work-life balance upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that article, Kevin, would you like me to sort of summarize the article then? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So in that article, and again, I understand work-life balance is a great thing, but sometimes, and I went back to my own experience with this, that sometimes it works the other way. Sometimes doctors in their life experience that they find that work gives them comfort and solace, which they don't get at home. And I went through a period like that with my own family. Like I'm not going to go into the details. We had 2 teenage sons at the time, and they had, issues, I guess, and it affected the whole family. It affected my wife and I's relationship. And during that time, I wanted to go to work. I wanted to get out of the house. I got into the office like 2 hours before everybody else. And you know how when you turn on your computer and everything, has that little musical sound? Well, that was music to my ears, hearing that music, just turning on the computer, because now it was safe. And I would look forward to being on weekend call. And in the evenings, I would look for things to do, so I wouldn't have to go home and face the issue du jour, let my wife take care of it. And I got home and maybe it'd calm down a bit. So, so what was happening, I realized, is that during that time, I was getting comfort, solace, and respect at work that I didn't get at home. And consequently, I just worked harder and harder. And sometimes it wasn't even productive work. I mean, I'd be there and I'd see my last patient, and I'm looking at my inbox and I say, oh yeah, well, maybe I better call this patient, or, oh yeah, maybe there's some more x-rays I could review a little more, let's look at this lab work. And so, unfortunately, Kevin, things have worked out for me, and my life has been blessed with my family and so forth, but it was a rough patch. And so what I would say to folks, if there's a kernel of truth in this, and you are going through some of this, and you find that, turning on your computer in the morning kind of turns you on, or if you're sitting there and in the evening and you're pondering those borderline chloride levels, reach out and get some help. Really, this is not a good thing. This is not a good work-life balance.
How sustainable was that in terms of going to work to escape whatever home situation? Was that a prolonged period of time?
It was, I would say, it went on for probably a couple of years, really. Yeah, and no, it's I mean, we doctor, we can do just about anything, right? We put our nose to the grindstone. We just, we pay the piper. We just work. We can do what we want to do, but it wasn't a healthy work-life balance. But it happened. It happened to me, and I'm just assuming that it might happen to other people.
And when you were at work during those times with everything going on at home, how did that affect your family dynamic?
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, I mean, it couldn't have been good, because, on my wife's point of view, it's like, where is he? Why is he always at work? Why does the burden always fall on me to do these things? She used to say things. I remember she says, she says, oh, people at Kaiser, oh, they all think you're so nice. They ought to see what you're like at home. But it couldn't have been good for my kids. I should have been there more with them. I should have toughed it out. But in a way, I think I took the easy way out. It was so easy. It's such, I mean, at Kaiser, at any kind of job like this, the things are, what to expect. Things are safe. You know how things are going to go. You have some control, right? You have some control, and you get respect. A lot of times at home, that wasn't happening.
So it sounds like you had to make a little bit of a sacrifice in terms of your relationship, both with your wife and kids during this time.
Yeah, I did. I did sacrifice my time with them, and not just my time, but my spirit, my soul, And I do, and again, getting back to the article, I do think that this may be affecting other people too, that you're finding, safety and control and respect at work, and you don't get it at home, and it leads to a vicious cycle.
What broke that cycle? What made you spend more time at home after a couple years of making work a priority?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. That's a good question, Kevin. I can't point to one thing, one incident or one thing, but it wasn't one of those, signature moments. But one of my colleagues, Dr. Miriam Zeibergleit, I heard her, she was telling a story, and she said that one time her 6-year-old son came to her. She's a very busy physician, very busy clinician, works for all that. Her 6-year-old son comes to her and says, "Mom, if you have a cell phone, why did you have me?" And she said, this was a signature moment in her life. At that moment, she sort of changed just about her whole style of practice. And I didn't have one of those kind of signature moments, but I think it was just, life has a way of working out.
Now, if you were to replay that whole scenario again, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Oh gosh, so many things, Kevin. I wish I would have had more realization about what I was doing, because I would be telling myself this sort of myth. I'm a dedicated physician. That's why I'm here. I'm taking care of patients. That's the important thing. And we all have to make sacrifices at home, and you can have all sorts of rationalizations for why you do things. And if I'd have realized, had more introspection about what was happening, I think things would have been better.
Any regrets prioritizing the work over your family during a difficult time?
Yeah, I mean, there are regrets. I wish I would have done better. I wish I would have spent more real time. I wish I would have been taking some of the burden off my wife. I do have regrets, I do have regrets. And maybe if one person listening to this podcast can hear this and they're in kind of the same situation, then it maybe is worthwhile writing that article and coming on this podcast.
We're talking to Scott Abramson. He is a neurologist. His KevinMD article is titled "The Secret Life of Physicians: Work, Home, and the Battle for Balance." So for those other physicians, I think the scenario that you describe isn't uncommon. Stress at work, stress at home. What kind of insights, what kind of piece of advice do you have for these physicians who may be undergoing some difficult times at home?
Yeah. Or difficult times really, or difficult times at home, and they go to work as a salvation, And in general, Kevin, here's what I would say to folks. Have you ever heard this expression, the best physicians are destined to hell?
I have not.
Okay. Well, this is actually comes from the Hebrew Bible. And what it means is, and it seems like a strange thing, but what it means is sometimes the best physicians are often the most prideful. And because they're so prideful, they don't ask for help. Or they don't think they need help. And if they do think they need help, they're too proud to ask for it. And I know during my career, there have been times when I wished I wanted to ask for help, but I felt like, I don't want to appear stupid or incompetent or anything. And I didn't ask questions that I should have. But I think this works another way too, is sometimes that and because, these doctors don't ask for help, that's why they fail their patients and they're destined to hell. But I think it works another way too, is like sometimes the best physicians, the hardest working and so forth, are emotionally worn out and facing burnout. And we too don't ask for help. We do what we always do. We just put our nose to the grindstone. We pay the piper. We just work harder because when the going gets tough, you know what happens, and we suffer in silence. So what I would say to folks is, if you're on this path, if you're destined to hell as being the best physician, don't take the journey alone. Reach out to somebody, a trusted colleague, a psychologist, someone in your faith community. And I would also say to my colleagues that if you see one of your colleagues heading down this path, don't let them take that journey alone either. Reach out to them, give them a helping hand. And I think it comes down to this, Kevin, is friends don't let friends become the best physicians.
And my final question, Scott, tell us some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the KevinMD audience.
Basically is, like I say, if you're at work and you're finding that work is giving you things that you're not getting at home, comfort, safety, control, respect, think about that. Something may be off, and try to correct things, try to have insight into that, and reach out for some help.
Scott, thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight. Thanks again for coming back on the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.